Way to go, Tic Tac!
That's how you punch.
Wakanda forever!
You wouldn't have heard of me.
Let me put you on hold.
Dance off, bro! He's a friend from work!
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
What up, guys? It's Dom, and welcome back to another movie review. Today we are going over and ranking Captain America: Brave New World. Captain America: Brave New World, released in 2025, directed by Julius Onah. Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, finds himself in the middle of an international incident and must discover the motive behind a nefarious global plan. Now, after seeing all the trailers, I was very excited to see this movie. I really hoped it lived up to what the trailers were showing, and it didn't fully. It's still honestly a really good movie, and I did enjoy myself watching it. There were some issues though, so let's just get right into the 10 essential aspects of a movie. The first essential aspect is plot. So this plot to me is similar to that one of Deadpool and Wolverine, where if you didn't watch the previous movies that have been hinted at or mentioned in this movie, it's not going to make much sense. And this one at least does a better job than Deadpool and Wolverine. I feel like you can still watch this one without seeing Eternals, Incredible Hulk, or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and you'll still understand what's going on. You'll still enjoy the plot for what it is. It's just not going to be to that level that they expect you to. So that is one problem that I think it has. It's just, I personally have watched all of them, so it's kind of hard for me to put myself in that mindset. I know exactly what they're talking about. I'm in link with the universe. I've watched it for so long, so I know everything that goes on. So for me, it was a more enjoyable watch for that reason. But I do have to mention that if you didn't watch them, you're not going to be as in tune with the movie. So that's a problem it has. Otherwise, the plot makes sense. I think it is a really good concept. I like the way that they went with it. So it was a great plot. It just needs a little more development. The second essential aspect is attraction. So I thought the concept of this movie was really good. I loved that all these countries were chasing adamantium because it's the new big thing that's going to solve a lot of problems and really advance a lot of technology. So I thought that itself was really cool, being able to see Sam Wilson working with President Ross. But when it came to the actual comedy of the attractive part, it was a lot of cringy dialogue. There were jokes that were funny 100%, but there also were parts where you can clearly tell that they were trying way too hard in the writing room and it just didn't land. That's really the problem. So when it came to concepts, I feel like they did really well, and actual interestingness there was there. But the comedy is something they could have worked on to kind of elevate the movie, or they didn't have to go with such a comedic route either. So that's just something I noticed. The third essential aspect is theme. I guess a message that the movie is trying to convey to the audience could be just don't make empty promises. Don't tell someone you're going to do something even though you know you're not going to end up doing it, because it just brings them hope for no reason. And that is something that in the plot was brought up a lot, especially with Thaddeus Ross, someone he has promised was going to be set free. He knew he was never going to, and that caused a lot of mayhem. So definitely don't make empty promises, and if that's not the message, then I couldn't really think of one. The fourth essential aspect is dialogue. I do have to give credit that the characters, no matter how kind of cringy the comedy could be, the dialogue between them definitely felt real. They felt like they were actual characters that knew each other, that were having these fluid conversations that made sense. So that much I have to give them, even if the rest of the comedy, the jokes told in between, weren't the best. I can't diss on that actual dialogue, because I think that was actually rather good. The fifth essential aspect is acting. So overall, this movie didn't have any terrible acting. All of it was at least decent, but there were a few that I did want to mention in particular. Anthony Mackie, who played Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, the main character of this movie, I feel like he did a good job. The one thing I wanted to mention was, compared to his previous movies, he did add a little bit more of a comedic swing. Now, that is probably the writing, but he definitely had a different way of portraying this character in this movie. And it is easy to overlook because it's not by much, but I did notice how his comedic factor that he had was a little bit more cringy than I'm used to. Now, he's always had a sense of humor. or Sam Wilson has always had a sense of humor, but in this it seemed to be like dialed up to 11 compared to what he had previously. So that is just maybe a personal peeve of mine, that I didn't feel like that represented the character as much as I was hoping. But that's just the one thing I noticed. Otherwise, he did a good job of portraying Sam Wilson. He is who I think of when I see that character. And Harrison Ford, who played Thaddeus Ross, I think he did a really good job of being this just Thaddeus Ross, this angry dude who's trying to change. Now he's president and the Red Hulk. So I think he did a good job. And yes, it was weird kind of seeing this character I've seen for plenty of different movies switch actors to Harrison Ford. But honestly, he did a really good job. So as his debut in the MCU, he did fantastic. And Danny Ramirez, who played Joaquin Torres, his acting was the one that I noticed the most that bothered me. I feel like, yes, the writing again was definitely a factor in him being super comedic, but it felt like he was trying way too hard to be funny. He was, even if something wasn't funny, he still tried to find a way to make people laugh with it, and it got cringy in some moments. I didn't find myself laughing at some of his jokes. Some of them definitely hit. I will admit, some of them were funny, but there were some others where it was just bad timing or just something he said wasn't that funny, even though he was acting like it was really funny. And maybe it was just his whole comedic demeanor. But that's just something I noticed. If I had to pick on anyone that didn't do the best in acting, it would definitely be him. But the character is still cool, so I guess that's something. The sixth essential aspect is cinematography. Now, I gotta say this movie did well in both. I feel like the look of the movie was really good, especially the fight scene between Captain America and Red Hulk. That was definitely the best scene out of here, especially since they finally brought back the strength a Hulk should have. I mean, this man clapped and the whole White House broke. That is pure cinema, and that is how Hulk should be. It shouldn't be this big green dude with glasses. It should be this angry rage monster that uses his full power and just breaks buildings. That's really how I loved how that looked. I loved seeing the White House crumble. I loved seeing all these different shows of strength that this guy had in that fight scene, and all of it looked good. So I have to give that, the visuals, the cinematography. And for the emotional side, honestly, towards the end of the movie, the interaction that the characters had, I'm not going to spoil, but the end of the movie definitely had some emotional value, especially since you were invested in these characters after watching the whole movie. So emotional, they definitely did good, but cinematography for visuals, I think they did better. The seventh essential aspect is editing. So this movie is just barely under 2 hours at 1 hour and 58 minutes, and I think that's a good length. I mean, it had enough time to do a good story and explain everything, show these characters, let them develop, have an ending that makes sense. So, I mean, it doesn't really need to be over 2 hours. Now, it didn't have to be shorter, because I feel like if they cut it, they would have removed a lot of scenes that were necessary to the end of the story, to all these different plot points. So I feel like 1 hour and 58 is pretty good length, and it was paced decently well. I heard from early screenings of this movie that it was going to be choppy because of some fight scenes and some reshoots, but they did clean it up for the final release, so I'm really glad about that, because that definitely would have lowered it a little bit more for me. But yeah, I think the editing was perfectly fine. I didn't really see anything that threw me off. The eighth essential aspect is soundtrack. So overall, the soundtrack is just like any other superhero movie, just intense music behind a fight scene. But the song Mr. Blue was actually a big pivotal point of the plot. It was necessary to make this plot make sense the way that they used it. So I do have to mention that using a song or a sound in that kind of sense is interesting, because obviously they could have chosen any song, but they chose this one for a reason. And it's very important to the plot. So even though the rest of the soundtrack isn't very memorable, that song is. The ninth essential aspect is directing. So I feel like it's the director's job to take these previous 8 essential aspects, put them together to make a movie that's worth watching. And the director of this movie is Julius Onah, and he's previously directed 3 movies. And they were The Girl is in Trouble, The Cloverfield Project, and Loose. I've never seen the other 3 movies that he has directed, so I don't really know what to base it off of. But I mean, this was his first shot at an MCU movie, and he honestly did not flop. I feel like this movie is better than it's been told that it is. Now, I'm trying to remove that bias of me knowing the other movies previous to it, so it doesn't completely tip the scales. But I do think he did a solid job. There wasn't too many discrepancies that I can really name off that would have ruined this movie for me. I feel like everyone did what they're supposed to do to a point. Other than some of the comedy to it, it was fine. So he did a decent job. And the 10th essential aspect is time. It might stand the test of time for being in the MCU. It might stand the test of time for being the good rendition of a Hulk character. Who knows? I just think it's not the Captain America movie that people will remember. People will remember Winter Soldier. People will remember Civil War. People will remember the first Avenger. I don't know if they will remember Brave New World 20 years down the line. I will. I know that because I'm a Marvel guy. But when it comes to the general audience, I don't know if this will be one of those movies that they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember when I saw that in theaters. It was awesome. I can't wait to watch it again. I don't think that's going to end up being that way. For me, it did stand the test of time, or it will, but I don't know for general audience. Now, onto the reviews. So, Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it a 50%, Rotten Tomatoes audience gave it an 80%, and IMDb gave it a 61%. So, obviously, the critics don't think this is good, the audience does think it's good. I am probably right in between. I'm probably a little bit higher than IMDb. I think it should be like a 70. I think it's done well, maybe a 75 even. I think it's definitely done well. Is it breaking any records? I don't think so, but it's definitely a movie that is good, that is a decent addition to the MCU. Definitely not a flop is what I'm trying to say. So I don't know where 50 came from. 61 I understand a little more. 80 I respect, but I think it deserves to be in the 70s. And finally, the rankings. So, in 2025, it's going to be first. It's the first movie I've done this year, so until I do more, it's going to stay in this first position. In the 2020s, it's going to be 10th, above Deadpool and Wolverine and below Alien Romulus. Now, it's above Deadpool and Wolverine simply because both had plots that relied on the previous movies. I just think that this plot in particular, you could watch without seeing previous stuff and still enjoy to the similar value. While in Deadpool and Wolverine, if you didn't watch any of the other movies, the plot's gonna be stinky, a little set. But I think both these movies are very similar in range. I personally like Deadpool and Wolverine a lot more, but that's because I know all the characters that show up. I've watched all the previous movies. I'm invested in this universe, and Deadpool is one of my favorite characters, so that is why I would enjoy that movie more. I just know that Brave New World is just a better movie. It's just made better, it has better aspects to it than that movie did, so that's why I had to put it above it. And it's below Alien Romulus because I also think that movie does rely on the previous movies, but definitely not nearly as much. It's just a few scenes here and there where if you didn't watch it, it's not going to make a lot of sense, but that's literally just a few scenes. I think the world is beautiful. I mean, the cinematography is amazing with the whole look of space. Like I said in that review, space movies either have an amazing looking movie or terrible. There's no in between. It's either the space looks awesome or it looks terrible. And I feel like the actual chills you get when you see the face huggers and the actual xenomorph, it's just great cinematography in general. And the plot actually makes sense. It's something that you can be invested in. You are very invested in the characters and actually getting emotionally invested in them. So if anything happens, you do feel it. I just think Alien Romulus was just better made than Brave New World was. And in all time, it's going to be basically the same thing. It's going to be 30th, above Deadpool and Wolverine and below Alien Romulus. So of course, I'm not going to explain why it's between those again because it's there for the same reasons. That's all I have for Captain America Brave New World. If you guys enjoyed this review, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and make sure to comment what movie you want me to review next. I've finished all the comments that people have done to me, so the next person to comment one will get their movie next. That's just how it's going to work because I'm completely done with that list. And make sure to check out my best friend, Mr. Majoritarian. He does the same thing I do. He's the one that got me into movie reviewing in the first place. He has the same 10 essential aspects along with reviews and rankings for the year, decade, and in all time. He just has a different view of movies than I do, and it is very interesting. I definitely oversee some things that he notices and vice versa. So if you want to see someone that has a completely different view on the movie, definitely go check him out. His link is always going to be in my description. And otherwise, I hope you guys have an amazing night. Peace out.